Welcome to rSlash where a man spends an entire decade destroying a scammer's life. A little over 10 years ago, when I was a young carpenter, I met a guy who I'll call Chad because F Chad. Chad was a new hire by the company I was working for and became my helper. We got along famously. Even though he was 10 years older than me, he didn't mind working under a 23-year-old carpenter as an apprentice. Chad and I had worked together for 6 months when he brought up the idea of starting a business together. He figured between the two of us, we could easily run a crew and build houses. After talking it over with my pregnant girlfriend, now wife, we decided it would be better for me to be an employee, but still a 50% partner for tax reasons and insurance purposes. Chad said that was fine with him, so we started laying out who was to take care of certain aspects of the business. Chad was to be the guy to find work, as I look, and still do, way younger than I am, and it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in the client to think that their framer is 16. Chad was also to take care of payroll, insurance, and any other financial factions. My duties were simple: staff and run the crew and keep on budget, something that came easy to me. I was to be paid an hourly wage as well as 50% of profit after all business expenses. I never took my profit draw as I rolled it back into growing the company. Things were great for about 6 months. The crew was working well together, we had a few houses under our belts, and a contract for a 10,000 square foot custom house with multiple outbuildings. Things were great. So Chad has never built a foundation, and we usually hired a crew to put the foundation in for us. As, like I said, Chad has never built one, and I personally hate concrete work. We couldn't get our normal foundation crew in, so I stepped up and said, F it, I'll do it myself. The company we were building for is one of the best custom home builders around, and doing a good job on this house could mean that we wouldn't have to pound the pavement looking for work. Work would be given to us. Perfect arrangement. Until it wasn't. Chad started spending money like it was going out of style. He sold us 2500 Chevy pickup and bought a new Jeep Wrangler. He had the Jeep for about a month before he sunk it in water while 4x4ing, and it caught fire mysteriously a few days after. He received an insurance payout and bought a brand new 2500 Power Wagon, which he, in short order, sunk in water within a few weeks. I never noticed the red flags as Chad and I rarely spoke face to face. He was the business side, I was the get stuff done side. I finished the foundation and picked up the check from the builder. The builder said that we overbilled him by 25%, but he was happy with the work that we, specifically I, had done. But not to overbill again, as he doesn't like overpaying, as there may not be any money left at the end of the build. I apologized and asked him to cancel the check and issue one for the work actually completed. He agreed too and said, I am so happy to have honest people working for me. I usually don't pick up the checks, nor did I ever really look at the books, as it wasn't in the scope of my responsibilities. This prompted me to log on to our corporate account and see that we are so far in the red that we couldn't afford to buy a red pen, let alone cover payroll. I showed up at Chad's house and tore a strip off of him. He apologized and promised to top up the account with his personal profit draw money. I go into work Monday to find the locks on our tool bin had been changed, my name removed from all accounts, and a letter taped to the tool bin stating I was dismissed from my duties for an undisclosed reason. I was freaking furious. I was not aware that as a business partner, I could be fired. I found another job quite quickly and tried my best to put it behind me. That's when I found out where the money was going and that Chad had been slandering my name around town, blaming me for the missing money, as well as a bunch of egregious statements about my work ethic, trade skills, mental stability, and home life. Now, I fastidiously tracked all of our interactions with a simple journal and had backups of the transactions of our business account. I also happen to have backups of all our texts, voicemails, and pictures of everything. This is the revenge part. I took the evidence to my father's lawyer, rest in peace friend, who started a fraud and embezzlement investigation through the CRA, the Canadian Revenue Agency, which is Canada's IRS, and called the insurance provider to make sure they were being paid. They had never received anything. I called the builder whom we were building for and explained what was happening. He told me that Chad had essentially stolen around $30,000 for payment of work not completed and had broken into their office and stolen another $15,000 in replacement value of equipment and tools. I did what anyone would do. I called the police. Police said they couldn't help me and said it was a civil case, and the builder said he wasn't going to sue as Chad had no money and it wasn't worth the headache. So I called his auto insurance company, sent them all the pictures of his sunk vehicles, texts about them, and a short video he sent of him lighting the Jeep on fire. Insurance company filed charges against Chad and won. Chad is on the hook for around $130,000. I've spent the last 9.5 years telling anyone who will listen about Chad, and I have had him essentially blackballed from the carpentry industry around here because it's not slander if it's true. I have also looked up his criminal history as it is public domain every 3 months or so, and I make a point of showing up at his court proceedings or offering myself as a character reference for the Crown. That's the prosecution. So I've gone out of my way to remind Chad that he can't screw me over without repercussions. And no, this doesn't end here. Years have passed and I am still pissed off. I receive a call from a guy offering me a job. It was the builder that Chad screwed over. Not remembering that we know each other, after I explained who I was and the bridge is burnt due to Chad, he still offers me the job. Medical, dental, company van, gas card, corporate credit card, I accept his offer. First order of business finds another way to screw with Chad. Through the grapevine, I find where Chad is living and working. New boss calls the company Chad is working for and Chad is summarily fired. I get in touch with Chad's landlord, explain how he operates, and Chad is evicted for unpaid rent. He was apparently a couple months behind. I also managed to get his girlfriend's phone number, call her, and explain what this guy does to people, and his extensive criminal history, including but not limited to fraud, identity theft, insurance fraud, his many assaults, and his wanted picture published in the paper. Turns out she is the owner of his truck, the primary operator, but he pays the insurance. He cannot insure a vehicle until he pays off what he owes for the fraud. She asked me what she should do. I say that I'll take care of it. I call the insurance provider, explain what is going on, for them to tell me he doesn't even have a license anymore. They void the insurance on his girlfriend's truck after speaking to her and set up a sting with the police. I personally get to be involved as I knew what was going on. So I sit and wait for the day it goes down. I roll up behind the unmarked police cruiser and quickly explain who I am and what my plans are. The police are thinking that they are just wanting to pull him over for driving without a license and no insurance. I said I'm going to call him immediately as soon as I see him. So he comes cruising out and I make the call. He actually picked up the phone to call me a bunch of names and the N-word. I am as white as the fresh fallen snow and he promptly gets pulled over. Police issue a ticket for reckless driving, no seatbelt, no license, and using a handheld device. During this, the girlfriend pulls up and proceeds to give consent to search her truck. In the truck, they find multiple IDs, stolen credit cards, a couple ATM skimmer machines, and a fake police badge. He was arrested on the spot. Revenge over. Revenge over, right? Nope. Police then asked to search the residence he was living at. He moved into his girlfriend's house after I had him evicted from his own place. In the garage, they find a vast collection of stolen tools, a lot of which belonged to the builder I was working for from when he broke into their office, and they were all stupidly still labeled with the company's inventory control stickers. This brought on more charges, and he was remanded to police custody until his trial date. Well, justice is sometimes slow here in Canada, and his trial date was at the time 17 months into the future. Well, yesterday was his trial date, so my boss, who Chad ripped off, Chad's ex-girlfriend and I attend the hearing, just to see the man squirm. His judgment was 8 years in jail after being granted time and a half for time served, a $100,000 fine, 1,000 hours of community service after release, and no possibility of parole. I got to watch him be taken away in chains twice. Never underestimate the fury of a quiet man. And F Chad. So the OP in the story is a straight up stalker. But usually stalkers stalk someone because they're like obsessed with them and they want to, have sex with them. But this is like a hate stalker. OP stalked Chad because he wanted to make him suffer. Oh, and suffer he did. I was visiting my friend at his dad's house in an area where the land is so steep, all the driveways have to switch back up from the main road to the houses. A straight driveway is not an option because it would be steeper than the building code allows. A few doors down the road, there lived a nice old couple who until recently had had a vacant lot next door to them, but the lot had sold and the new owner had started construction on a new house. Unfortunately, the lot was so steep that the new owner built his driveway partly on the old couple's land. It was carved out of the hillside with an excavator. This probably wouldn't have been a big deal if the new owner had approached the old couple first and asked nicely. But did he? Would I be telling this story if he had? In fact, the old couple had no idea what was happening until they came home one day to see a huge scar in the hillside, snaking up from the road in front of their house, across the corner of their property, and winding upwards to where an excavator was working to prepare the land for the new neighbor's house. They were pretty upset, but being nice, reasonable people, they figured it was an honest mistake, so they went over to talk to the machine operator. He didn't know anything useful, but he was happy to give them the phone number of the new property owner. The old guy gave him a call and politely explained the situation, but his new neighbor, whom he'd never even met, was having none of it. He flat out denied that the driveway crossed the property line, and he was rude enough that the old guy was pretty upset. At this point, the old couple weren't sure what to do. They double-checked the property pins to make sure they were right, and of course they were. But after further conversations with the new owner, it was clear he was an unreasonable guy who wasn't going to come to the negotiating table willingly. The old couple didn't want to take legal action because they would have been expensive, and frankly, the damage to their yard was already done. At the same time, they couldn't just let someone walk all over them like that, especially if they were going to be living next door for the foreseeable future. So the situation stewed for a while as construction continued on the new house until one day when my friend's dad saw the old couple in the neighborhood and they started chatting. Of course, they told him the story about the butthole new neighbor. Now, my friend's dad really likes the old couple who don't have a mean bone in their bodies, so he was pretty pissed about the situation, and when he went home, he couldn't get it out of his head. That evening, after a few beers, he had a brilliant idea. He called up the old couple, explaining his plan, and asked for their permission to carry it out. They chuckled and gave him the go-ahead, so he hopped into the rusty old full-size pickup he kept as a second-hand vehicle and drove it over to the old couple's place, where he parked it across the encroaching driveway, making sure it was entirely on their property. The next morning, the work crew arrived bright and early to find that they couldn't drive to the house they were building because some jerk-off had parked a sucky old F-150 across the driveway. They saw the note in the window with my friend's dad's phone number on it, so they called him to ask WTF. He explained that he had permission from the owners to park there and that no, he would not move his truck so they could get to work. Furthermore, if anyone attempted to tow the truck, they would be charged with trespassing and theft. There was no way the construction guys were going to haul all the tools up the hill by hand, and they didn't want to get in the middle of a legal battle, so they called the new owner to let him know they'd be taking the day off and that they'd continue to take days off until their property boundary dispute was resolved. The new owner called the old couple in a fury, but the old couple told them the same thing my friend's dad told the construction workers. Basically, the vehicle was parked on their property, so if he had a problem with that, he could go F himself. To make an already long story shorter, the new neighbor ranted a while, but eventually he wanted his house to be built, so the nice old couple ended up with a significant sum of money in exchange for an easement allowing the driveway to pass across the corner of their property, and my friend's dad got several thank you cases of beer and the satisfaction that comes from putting a butthole in his place. The dad in this story kind of feels like a redneck Batman. He's defending innocent people with beer and pickup trucks. Years ago, shortly after I graduated high school, I got a new job to support myself during college. The new gig was in a pet store, and I was working in the department that sold the fish, aquariums, reptiles, and birds, etc., etc. The store manager was an awesome guy who I will call Kurt. Kurt was an old school guy. He went to work, worked hard, and went home. That's all he expected out of you as well. My immediate manager over my department was this large, snaggletooth witch of a woman. I'll call her Stephanie. We got off to a bad start because she quickly found out that I knew more about reptiles than her. She preferred the fish, whereas I'd kept snakes for the past 4 or 5 years. Her ego couldn't handle a fresh employee not needing her guidance. From then on, she was terrible to me. She signaled me out to clean the goldfish tanks and had the other employees cover sales every day I worked. She would say rude things to me such as, "You are the weak link in my team. You are the reason I'm having problems in this department." Fast forward about a year, my hours had been cut by about 25%. I asked the store manager what the deal was, and he told me that our department had lost too much money between lack of sales and broken merchandise, etc. This puzzled me, but I didn't think much of it because everybody's hours were cut. Simultaneously, myself and a few coworkers had noticed something strange. Stephanie had recently taken much more interest in the customers. She insisted on helping certain customers and sending us to do busy work while they were there. A customer came in one evening and was talking to us about how nice Stephanie is. Turns out Stephanie was breeding mice and selling them to customers outside the store. We found out she was breeding all of her animals, her dogs, turtles, mice, and selling them to customers she met through our store. Not only was this taking business from us, our store had a couple corporate policies. We did not feed nor sell mice as live food for snakes, and we donated a lot of time and money to shelters, and we condemned breeding dogs and cats for sales. Stephanie was making money by selling animals to the customers, all the while her department had hours cut for all of its employees. It didn't quite make sense how this was costing us so much money until one evening I thought I had it figured out. Stephanie was an otherwise lazy woman, but when one of her customers came in, she was by their side the whole time. I watched closely as she followed a customer around, helping them pick out a cart full of expensive aquarium decorations and terrarium supplies like lights and bulbs. I followed and wrote down every item she grabbed. I wanted to see where this went. She directed the customer to a register and went to check them out. She's lazy and would never do this for any other customers. I noted the time and went back to work. I later spoke to other cashiers about Stephanie checking customers out, and they said that she only ever rang up certain customers, and she acted weird when she did it. They suspected she was abusing coupons for them or applying hefty discounts. I got my coworkers to corroborate my story about the under-the-table animal sales and suspicious behavior, and I went to talk to Kurt. I handed him a paper with about 20 UPCs and the time written on it and said, I think if you look up a transaction from Register 2 at this time last night, you will find a large discount applied to it. These are the items I would expect you to find on that transaction. He was a bit puzzled and I explained everything to him. I told him I didn't want to make any accusations before because I wasn't sure, but after seeing her in action, I was pretty sure something was going on. He thanked me and assured me he would look into it. A couple weeks later, I was at work and noticed Kurt was standing near the door watching closely. It just so happened Stephanie was coming in for a shift right about that time. The second she walked through the door, he called her over to his office. Apparently waiting in his office was a regional manager from corporate. He looked at the list I gave him and looked up transactions from the night before. He found one at the exact time I wrote, but it only had about half of the items I listed. But every item that was on the receipt was on the list I gave him. This prompted him to watch her for a few weeks, and in that time frame, they found her to be taking her customers around shopping, personally taking them up to the register and scanning every other item and putting the expensive stuff into the cart without ringing it up. In that time span, she had given away over $1,500 in merchandise. And he looked back at the logs we keep for broken merchandise that is written off and found an excessive amount of aquarium supplies and decorations that were signed off by her. It was something like 1,000% more written off broken merchandise than was found at the same time last quarter. All in all, she was charged with stealing and defrauding the store and over $3,500 in merchandise. And it just so happened that Kurt had already arranged for police to meet them after firing her to escort her out. I don't know if she went to jail, but I did watch her get walked out by police with about 20 employees staring. I wish I could have said something, but I had to settle with her making eye contact with me as she walked out, to which I gave her a quick wink. I'm so sorry, everyone, but I have to do it. So, you know Stephanie, who works with the fish and always likes to check out people with aquarium gear? I think there's something fishy going on there. That was rSlash and man, I loved reading that first story. I think that is the longest lasting story of revenge I've ever heard because it took literally a decade to resolve. Man, some people are really motivated by revenge.